Good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for September 19th, 2019. And here are your headlines. Understanding your retirement plan and investment management fees. Are smaller retirement plans now in 401k lawsuit crosshairs? And new retirement legislation. Is e-delivery on the horizon? Investment management and retirement plan fees have been at the center of many 401k and 403b lawsuits. Those lawsuits had traditionally been on the larger end of the retirement plan spectrum, those with assets north of $1 billion. But it seems as though there is an emerging trend where smaller retirement plans are now in the crosshairs. Joining me now to discuss, Kevin Walsh. He's a principal with Groom Law Group, an employee benefits firm based in Washington, D.C. Kevin, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Jeff. It's always good to be on.
Yeah, I got to tell you, we're double dipping with you this week because we had you featured in the Morning Pulse Academy where you were talking about who is a fiduciary. And naturally, we're kind of segueing into these a fee discussion and litigation discussion. So glad to have you back and glad you can make some time for us.
Well, thanks for having me on. And I watched the segment of Who's a Fiduciary, and I was wondering when I had filmed that. So I knew it wasn't yesterday, but it's always good to see it again.
Yeah, we did a great job, and I think really opened some people's eyes in terms of responsibility. Let's talk about fee litigation. Give folks a brief update on that. So just as far as background, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what's been going on for the last 12 years in about 30 seconds or a minute.
Okay, so in recent years, there's been a focus on fees. And so basically, in order to run a retirement plan, kind of a company or the plan fiduciaries, they need to hire kind of outside service providers, whether they be entities that then keep track of the records or entities that manage the investments or that do things like sending notices to participants. And in exchange for doing those services for the plan, those companies tend to be paid fees. And the people who run the plan, so inside the company, you typically have some fiduciaries who are assigned responsibility for managing the plan and making prudent decisions. One of their responsibilities is to keep the fees down. Because, if you spend $1 on fees, it's $1 you can't spend on retirement. And recently, there's been a whole lot of litigation, either asserting that, these service providers are getting too much, or that the fiduciaries are kind of asleep at the wheel and haven't been monitoring the fees the way that they should.
That's an excellent summary. And for those who do not know what a fiduciary is, check Tuesday's show where Kevin talks about that. So Kevin, let's fast forward. It's been about 12 years since, I guess, the very first case. And most of these cases have been focused on larger retirement plans. So larger retirement plans typically are $1 billion or more. That's in total assets. And they've been challenged on many different grounds that we don't have time to go into here, but people can certainly look some of these cases up. They probably read about them in the news. And there have been several settlements. But now it looks like, and I want to get your opinion on this, that we could be looking at lawsuits down market, which means smaller retirement plans.
So, I don't speak for plaintiff lawyers, but my guess, if I were one of them, is that you try to figure out who has the deepest pockets, because it's probably more lucrative to sue someone with more money than it is to sue someone with less money. So the focus point, at least initially, was on plans that have kind of the deepest pockets, the biggest plans, the most assets, and also where if you're paying a little bit too much on a fee basis, kind of per head or given investment options. It's easier to show that there was kind of a larger loss than there would if it was a smaller plan. But it seems as though kind of the plaintiff community may be running out of kind of those mega plans to go after. And they're trying to figure out now whether it's worthwhile to go kind of down market to go after big plans or middle-sized plans. But I think that's been the uptick we've seen lately.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way. And you can't, you have to understand that these lawyers are certainly going for potential settlements. They need people with deep settlements. They need people with deeper pockets, and therefore they're challenging. Now, if I'm a participant in a retirement plan, and I know you don't typically advise participants, but we had fee disclosure back in 2012. So people watching this show should be aware if they're in a retirement plan, number one. Hopefully they are contributing, but they should be aware, Kevin, of what those fees are, and they can find that on some of their disclosures, correct?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at your disclosures, you can figure out a lot of the fees you're paying, and it's important to understand that when you pay fees, when fees are taken out of your account, that they are kind of reducing the ultimate money, the amount of money you have available in retirement. On the other hand, you've got to balance the fees against the services you're getting. So if you're getting disclosures, you're getting investment options, you're being kind of someone's keeping track of the amount that you have and where you live. Those things cost money, so it's a fee for services. And at the end of the day, the goal of the retirement system isn't to pay the least fees possible. It's to get more retirees in a position where they can live comfortably. So if investment options pay higher fees but they generate better returns, that might be better than an investment option that pays less in fees but has less returns. So it's really a balancing role, and plan fiduciaries are stuck with a kind of a challenge that I wouldn't want to deal with. But they've got to balance, what's the service that the plan's getting, what's the service the participants are getting against the fees they pay.
That's a very astute comment, Kevin. And if you're a plan fiduciary, I think one of the takeaways, one of the best practices, so now we're talking to all the employers out there, is you can put your plan out to bid in a competitive bidding process and benchmark your fees. And that is considered to be a best practice every so many years, right, Kev?
So I'm hesitant to use terms like best practice, but I mean, I think the process you're describing is something that plans can use to success. On the other hand, you can see plans go out for longer term contracts and negotiate a lower rate for using a long-term contract. But there's a diversity of ways that fiduciaries can meet their responsibilities, and I think you've highlighted one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, so Kev, we're going to go to commercial break, but can you stick around? Because I want to shift gears with you. We're going to go from fees, and I want to talk about regulatory. So can you hang with us while we go to break?
I'm happy to hang with you while we go to break.
Okay, thanks, Kev. And when we come back, we're going to change gears and talk about retirement regulation. Kevin Walsh, he's going to stick around. Tune in right here on BRN AM. But if you're tired of the same. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. In the past, we've talked about comprehensive retirement plan legislation. Now we're going to shift gears and talk about new regulation. Kevin Walsh, principal of the Groom Law, he's still with us to discuss. Kevin, thanks for sticking around. Welcome back, and now we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we thank Kevin Walsh, who's a principal with Groom Law, who's still here with us. Kevin, like I said, you're doing triple duty. I'm glad you could stick around. So I want to shift gears. You've been really kind talking about fiduciary. You've also talked to us about some of the most comprehensive retirement legislation, but there's also a lot going on in terms of the regulatory environment. Would you mind just walking us through what is some of the latest news there?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I think from a regulatory standpoint, there's been a fair amount of movement lately. And a lot of it was spurred by an executive order that President Trump released last August, where he essentially told the Department of Labor, I'd like you to work on three things. I'd like you to work on allowing employers to band together for health plans. I'd like you to work on allowing employers to band together for retirement plans. And I'd like you to modernize your electronic disclosure rules. So the rules that govern kind of how notices are given to participants. In the last segment, we talked a little bit about kind of disclosure of plan fees and expenses. And typically those types of notices are delivered via paper. And I think what's going on here in the executive order was President Trump was signaling to the Department of Labor, it's 2018 then, it's 2019 now, it might be time to start shifting the default. So kind of as a little bit more background, the Department of Labor got done both of those first two priorities. And recently, a rule on electronic disclosure has left the Department of Labor, and it's now at the White House for their review prior to being published. So why is this a big deal? What are we thinking about here? And it's largely kind of the obvious. Paper tends to be expensive.
Yeah.
It's expensive because it's not environmentally friendly. It's expensive because you've got to put it in envelopes. It's expensive because delivery is expensive. They get thrown out. And then also, people move. So there's a number of ways that paper can be expensive. And then the option is, well, what about electronic disclosure? And I mean, it has the kind of opposite advantages. It cuts out delivery costs. It's easier to save because it just kind of stays on your hard drive. And then email addresses and phone numbers tend to be more permanent. So,
well, I was going to interrupt you here, Kev. I just want to ask you, so is this kind of a no-brainer in 2019? Because most of us carry devices. I'm holding my phone. It's right here. This is my laptop. Most of us do have email addresses. Is this really a no-brainer at this point? And does this go in, officially into the Federal Register and become a regulatory requirement?
So for me, I can see a lot of pros here, but there's a handful of cons that are unique to our space. In the retirement space, you tend to have more seniors than you do in other contexts. So as the shift from paper to digital has taken place, I think the Department of Labor would like to be, not a cutting edge regulator, although most of the cutting edge regulators have already moved to e-delivery, but kind of a lagging regulator. They want to make sure that folks who prefer paper or who are older and not as familiar with technology aren't forced to use technology in a way that means that they kind of lose access or are less comfortable in making sure their benefits are there. That being said, I think we're at a time where we're going to see a proposal in the near future that has a shift from paper as the default to possibly making electronic delivery the default. And I think you and I can see a fair amount of upside to that, although I think it'll be a more contentious proposal than we may initially think.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to make sense, and I certainly understand a subset of the population that may or may not use electronic communications. I think that will certainly change over time. Maybe some of this population is actually using electronic for some of these other benefits like healthcare. Maybe they're getting their Social Security statement online, even though some of those are still generated. But it just seems like, I guess, the prudent thing in terms of if you're an individual, making sure that your record keeper, your healthcare provider, they have your email address, which actually seems relatively easy to maintain relative to the 4 or 5 lines of a person's address, physical address.
Yeah, I mean, let alone your email address. I think something that participants can do and beneficiaries and people who are getting these benefits can do is, if you haven't been getting notices in a while, or if you're moving or you've moved, reach out and let your plan sponsor, if you know who your record keeper is, let them know that you've moved, and let them know your email address. Because, I think one of the things the retirement system is struggling with is it really wants to make sure, the system doesn't make sense if participants can't be connected with their benefits. And participants can really help by making sure that they give people ways to stay in touch, phone numbers, emails, physical addresses. And it's kind of the more the merrier and all the above approach. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Kevin, thanks again for pulling double duty or triple duty in this case. Really enjoy how you kind of break down regulation, legislation, and some of the key tenets of ERISA. Really important, and appreciate your contribution going forward. Have a great week and a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Great. Looking forward to talking to you on Friday for the podcast.
And folks, that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Hey, have a financial topic or someone of interest that you think we should interview? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the latest news and headlines, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse for retirement news that matters. So until tomorrow, roll with the changes, and don't forget, keep on saving.
Waiting here for you to take and drink of. But if you're tired of the same